ألا من كنت مولاه فهذا علي مولاه. اللهم وال من والاه وعاد من عاداه.
My full name is Yusuf Amin Hemmings. Normally I go by Yusuf Amin. Originally born in Brooklyn, New York. Lived most of my life in Orlando, Florida. And then I've been here in Tampa for about 8 years now. I lived till in Brooklyn for maybe about 5 years, so it wasn't too long before I moved to Orlando with my family. My mom decided to have everybody move down because of the warmer weather. They come from a tropical background, so she thought the warmer weather would be nicer, and you know, the living here in Florida is a little bit slower and a little more calm for us, so she decided to move down here to Florida. My mother is from Central America. She's from Pedro Miguel, Panama, and my dad is from Jamaica. So this is something that they were used to. They like I said, the weather was too much for them, so they decided they want to move down here. I guess implement those two things. So it's really important for me to respect leadership and understand leadership and follow leadership, you know. And I think once you have that, you know, the sacrifices that you make because of leadership, it just kind of, they go perfect hand in hand. That's it. So that's one thing that actually affected me a lot from, I guess, Sunni Islam, because that leadership, the leaders that we have always been great, and their sacrifice that they made for it it's shown. So that's always hit me really hard.
And I'll ask one final question. Is this leadership quality something that you're trying to inculcate in your kids as well, and really hone in and learn that, you know,
yeah,
this is something that we gotta learn from and model around it?
I would think so, because there is a Sunni hadith from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said that you know, the father to his children is like the prophet to his nation. So I've always tried to make sure, of course, that leadership and I guess lead my ship, as I was told by one leader, to make sure we lead our ship in the best way so that they become good leaders and lead, you know. So that, yeah. Inshallah.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
So if you can just tell us what your name is and where you're from?
My full name is Yusuf Amin Hemmings. Normally I go by Yusuf Amin. Originally born in Brooklyn, New York. Lived most of my life in Orlando, Florida. And then I've been here in Tampa for about 8 years now.
Really? So how long did you live in Brooklyn, was it?
Yeah, I lived till in Brooklyn for maybe about 5 years, so it wasn't too long before I moved to Orlando with my family. My mom decided to have everybody move down because of the warmer weather. They come from a tropical background, so she thought the warmer weather would be nicer, and you know, the living here in Florida is a little bit slower and a little more calm for us, so she decided to move down here to Florida.
You mentioned tropical weather, so
yes.
Where is she originally from?
Well, my mother is from Central America. She's from Pedro Miguel, Panama, and my dad is from Jamaica. So this is something that they were used to. They like I said, the weather was too much for them, so they decided they want to move down here.
And you settled into Orlando right away then, I guess?
Pretty much, you know, it was, when we came down here, we didn't want to move. You know, we were so, I mean, I was young, but you know, the fast life there in New York City was something that we were used to. You know, everything's go and go, and we came down here. We moved down in our house, and the neighborhood is now full of you know, it's a complex now, but when we moved there, it was a giant orange grove. So, you know, you know, about 30 years ago, you know, Orlando was pretty slow, and, you know, you had to have a car or you were walking everywhere. So, Orlando is starting to catch up to New York City. So, I mean, surprisingly, I decided to move here because it was a little slower. The community is better. Just in my opinion, I felt that it was a little more diverse, so I decided to come here, and then there were some people that I wanted to come here, and some of the people here I was a little comfortable with, so we decided to come here. Me and my wife decided to move here after I graduated. I have 4 older sisters, and I have 1 younger brother. I have 1 sister who comes back and forth from here and North Carolina, so her kids are up there going to school now. She's the oldest. I have 1 sister who now lives in Dubai. So they just moved there to teach. So they just moved there this year, maybe this school year. and I have 2 sisters. One's here in Tampa. We just met her, actually, and they live actually in the front of the neighborhood, her and her husband, and another sister that's in Orlando, and my youngest brother, his name's Omar. He lives in Orlando. Mom, you know, and I guess the Hispanic culture, it's one thing that's really, family is a big thing, you know, and she's always taught us to make sure we take care of each other and stay near each other and things like that. Well, as I mentioned, my mom is from Panama, so in the South and Central America, Catholicism is a big thing. So she always came from a very religious and God-minded culture. So it was always something that was really important for them. So and my dad, he came from Jamaica, and he was Rastafarian. So it was a big change when he moved here. He went to England first and then moved here to the States in New York. And that's where he and my mom met. And they were both very God-minded. They wanted some truth. So they converted to the Nation of Islam. And from there, after they got married and sometime later, they both converted to, I guess, Orthodox Islam, you know. It was a big jump for them because coming from the Nation of Islam and the beliefs are really different. And when Warati Muhammad became so-called Sunni Islam, a lot of his followers, which was my mom and dad, came over with him. So that's where, you know, that finding the truth and being with, finding that one truth, which is God, and things like that, there's something that's always been within them. So growing up, we've always been taught Sunni Islam. We went to the Sunni private schools, me and my brothers and sisters. So it was always something that was taught with us. And actually my stepfather he was a Sunni imam in New York. He was one of the first chaplains in the New York prisons to go and teach Islam to the inmates in the prisons there. So it's something that's that's always been pushed in our family. So coming from that, you know, it's always good to have that good. Yeah, since we were kids, there's always been something that, you know, there's always been, you know, we know there's something, we have to do the right thing and make the right choices. So it's always been something my mom pushed, you know, on the weekdays. Of course, like I said, we went to the Islamic private school. On the weekends, she had us doing the Al-Qaeda, you know, not Al-Qaeda terrorists, but Al-Qaeda, the little Quranic Arabic books they called them that. And, you know, so that we're learning Quran and learning how to read Quran and things like that. So it's always been something that was pushed for us since we were kids. I mean, I remember times where I was like, well, we don't need to do this every day of the week. You know, even it just got, you know, I mean, it just got really strenuous for me and my younger brother because we were like, we want to go play, you know. So it was just something that my mom was like, well, we have to go do this. You have to go there. And then after that, you can go hang out with your friends, things like that. So it's always been something that's been pushed for us, you know, so it's been a #1 thing for my mom. Well, because I came from secular school, public school, originally coming in, it was kind of hard for me because, you know, I was used to that way and being with my friends, clowning, things like that. So when we went to the Muslim school, I was considered kind of like the clown and would get in trouble somewhat. So, you know, and I was a know-it-all, and the teachers obviously weren't okay with that, and it kind of got me in trouble sometimes. So it was kind of a different coming in, even though that was something that we wanted to do, you know, and actually that kind of got me on on firm ground, you know, Islamically, and it made me understand the importance of Islam and wanting to be Muslim and things like that. And then when I left the school, I felt that I needed to be more of an impact on people than them being an impact on me. So it was something that I saw that when I went to, it was a complete difference. It wasn't necessarily a culture class because I was in the culture, I knew the things, I knew the people, and it was all just, it was something that it was a part of me already. So it was just more of me just going in there and not allowing it to affect me even more. So it didn't necessarily wasn't a big change for me. I would say I did. Talking back to a lot of my friends that I've just recently, I saw one of my friends that we went to high school together. We were childhood friends. We grew up in the same neighborhood in Orlando. And we spent a lot of time together. And, you know, he lives his life now, and obviously I have mine. We saw each other just recently at a cultural charity festival downtown Tampa, and we saw each other, and it was a good, happy moment. We hugged, saw each other, talked, and things like that. And seeing him, I remember him telling me, he's like, he mentioned a couple of our other friends, and he says, I talked to them recently, and you know, he spoke of some of their characteristics and his characteristics, and he says, we always knew that you were always firm in your beliefs. And he said to me, he says, you know, that I'm glad that I just saw you now. We haven't seen each other in years. He said, I'm glad I saw you because I've been trying to get on some sort of path, you know, and I want to be able to find the truth. And then he says, well, me and talking with some of our old friends, we know that this is something that you promote, and you walk it, you talk it. So, and not trying to toot my own horn, but he told me that, you know, that anything that I can help him with, because he feels that he's lost, you know, please, you know, fill him in, you know. So I've tried, you know, we've contacted each other since then, and, you know, obviously we've grown and matured, we have kids and things like that, but hopefully it would help, you know, and I feel that even though it took almost 20-something years, you know, alhamdulillah, it had some sort of impact on somebody, you know.
That's when you were in high school.
Image of Islam and Muslims when I was high school, I think it was really ignorant then. Not too many people knew about it. We weren't on the news. You know, Russia was a big deal, you know. And if you were Russian, you had a problem. You know, I remember playing war games. We'd be like, you're the Russians, we're the Americans type thing. So now it's, we're the Muslims, we're the Americans. So, but back then, it wasn't that big of a deal. And, you know, everybody knew I was Muslim. They just knew you don't eat pork and you pray, you know. You pray 5 times a day. So it wasn't something that was really an issue. And knowing with my friends, they knew that, you know, when Ramadan came, I had to fast. You know, they knew that I didn't eat pork when I came to their house. Things like that, you know, it wasn't really a real big issue for me. And being that, you know, when people see me, obviously, first thing, they don't think of Muslim. They see a black male, you know, and they don't necessarily think of that, you know. Even when they hear my name, oh, I know I got a lot of people named Yusuf, you know. So it wasn't something that, you know, I had an issue with, you know. Yeah, growing up, it was very, and I was really open about myself being Muslim, especially after coming from the private school. I was really proud of my Islam and proud of being a Muslim. So it wasn't, I mean, that's one thing when I learned when I went to the private school, is that they made sure that we knew of our religion and that we were sure of it, and you know, and actually from that I gained a big group of Muslim friends that I would spend time with outside of school. So in high school, I didn't necessarily hang out with people per se. I had these group of Muslim friends that I would always spend time with outside of school. So it wasn't, I tried to make sure that even though we may have not been the best Muslims, you know, and we were all trying, but we made sure we were with each other than other people who were not Muslims. In the private school, I was. My brother-in-law, who's in Dubai now, he always used to give us little stories here and there. He never told us who they were. You know, he would give us stories. Like, well, I have a story to tell you. And he would randomly just tell us this. You know, we were sitting down, you know, on like a rainy day at home. Like when he first married my sister, and I just realized one time he was telling me the story of a man, you know, who was getting water for his children, you know, and you know, he tried everything he could to try to get the water, and he mentioned about his hands being cut off. And I was like, and come to find out, it was Abu Fadl Abbas, you know, and you know, it was interesting that I always, sometimes I go back to him, I tell him, I was like, well, you used to tell us all these stories when we were kids, you know, and now we look at it and it's like, oh, okay. You know, he was kind of hinting to us. And he's always been like that, you know, kind of hint to you. He doesn't want to tell you straight out, this is what you need to follow, but he would give us these type of stories. And I remember him giving us stories about Imam Ali and the door of Khaybar and things like that. So all these little things he give a hint to, but not necessarily telling us who it is. You know, he would tell, well, this is a friend of the Prophet, or this was one of a great man that lived during the time of Islam and things like that. So, well, at school, in the private school, they did, but they would attribute it to the other companions and things like that. Like Omar, Abu Bakr, things like that. So these types of stories Like I remember being taught that, you know, that Omar was the one who did Khaybar and the door of Khaybar and things like that. And so nothing really blatant, you know, where it would be like, okay, well, that's, you know, questionable altogether. But I don't remember hearing too much about it other than my brother-in-law telling us about it. In college, I was trying to find out, you know, and I was learning and trying to make sure my deen was everything about it. I had to do everything that I did had to do with religion and Islam. So I decided, you know, of course, spend more time at the masjid. A group of friends of I, because I'm a big basketball fan and we play basketball, I play in leagues and Muslim leagues and things like that. So those same group of guys that I always spend time with, they decided that, okay, before we go out and play basketball, let's make sure that we learn something about Islam. So we would have like what we call little halakas. So we would get together and we would talk about Islam and all these types of things. So there was something that was really important for me. And all of us at the same time, it was like great because all 6 or 7 of us were like, all right, we want to become better Muslims. So how are we going to do this? So we decided that before we have our fun, we would learn about the religion first. So one of the brothers would sit down and talk and speak about different things, you know, and we each took turns. And during that time, my same brother-in-law, he saw that. He could see that, you know, this was something that was important for me. And I remember this story almost like it was yesterday. He came to me and he's like, okay, well, there's a religious program going on, and I want you to come. It's a speech, you know, and they have dinner after, and you know, if you want to come, that's great. If you don't, he says, okay. So I said, no problem. You know, I would love to go, you know. So we go to the program, and the speaker, I believe, I don't want to say his name, but I know that almost speech like it was right here in front of me. So he was talking about the different types of light, you know, and he broke it down, and nur, you know, and at the end of the speech, he did it in another language, and I believe it was in Urdu. So he did it in another language. So I didn't necessarily know what he was saying, but I noticed around me, and I look around, everyone's crying, you know, including my brother-in-law. So I didn't know what was going on. So I'm like, okay. And I'm just sitting there, you know, and I would say that I'm pretty much open-minded about everything. You know, anything that comes to me is new. I'm gonna listen to it. I'm gonna hear about it. And if I agree with it, then I'll agree with it. And if I don't, I'm gonna question and you know, scrutinize, which is what we've been taught to do as Muslims. So after it was done, and we were eating. Well, after it was done, everybody gets up and of course beating their chest and come find it's matam or not zinjir, but they're doing latmiya. And you know, I'm looking around and in comes like a casket, you know. So everyone's touching it, and it's you know, it's baby size. So you know, everyone's touching it. I'm like, okay, well, you know, I'm still trying to question it, and I'm not gonna. I didn't want to flip out and say, what is this, you know? And you know, you hear stories. This is shirk, you know, type thing. So I didn't, and I just sat there and I just kind of, you know, went with the flow. I didn't necessarily touch it, but after, I remember at dinner we were sitting down, and he's like, "What'd you think?" And I was like, "Well, the speech was. I thought the speech was awesome. I thought it was great. You know, he did a good job explaining the different levels of nur. He did a good job explaining, you know, how each one affects us, you know, and how it affects the angels and things like that." And I said, but at the part where he was doing it in another language, I didn't understand it fully. You know, because the Messiah that he did, it was, first he started off in English, where my brother-in-law understood, and he was crying from. And then when he did in Urdu, obviously everyone's crying. So I said, well, what about the part when they started crying and the casket and everything? And he proceeded to explain to me about the different things. This is Muharram, you know, this is the month where, you know, Imam Hussein was killed, you know, and I was like, I know of Imam Hussein, but, you know, when I was a kid during that time, and now, I mean, it's not as affected. Everybody knows Imam Hussein lived until he was really old, pretty old, you know. But back then, I mean, everyone thought Imam Ali stayed 13 forever, and Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein were babies forever. That was the idea, you know. They didn't grow up to become men and defend Islam, you know. So he's like, well, you know, he grew, and I was like, okay, you know, the Prophet's grandson, right? And he's like, yes, you know, he grew to be an old man, had kids and children, things like that. And I believe it was the night of Ali Asghar. So he explained that was the casket and the people touching the alams and things like that. I said, okay, understandable. And I just, you know, I kept continuing asking questions, you know, so why do we do it? Why is it commemorated? Tell me more about Imam Hussein. And he saw that the interest was there, so he gave me the book, Hussein, Savior of Islam. I forget the title, the author, but I remember reading that book in like 2 days, you know. And I couldn't believe it, you know. It really hit me hard. And my brother-in-law will tell you to this day that he said that I stayed in my room in the dark for like ever, you know, unless I had to go to school or go to work, you know. And I said I couldn't believe it, you know. And there's a part in the book, because it starts off, the author does a really good job. First, he starts off creation of man, and he talks about the prophets and how, you know, he talks about Prophet Isa a lot in there. And then in the end, he gives the story of Imam Hussein and what led to it, Muslim ibn Aqil and things like that. And what hit me the most was when the story of his sons, Muslim ibn Aqil alayhi salam, his sons, you know, and how Ibrahim and Muhammad, I believe, you know, before they were martyred, they're telling the person who was going to kill him, no, slaughter me first so I don't have to, you know, so I can. And then as they put the bodies in the river, one of the bodies waited in there, and it just really hit me really hard. And how can people do this to children, you know? So, and I said, well, I don't understand that, you know, and I don't understand how we are Muslims and we are still doing these things, and, you know, and how they did these things to the people who love the Prophet. So it affected me really hard. And I don't remember it fully, but he said that I would stay in the dark. I wouldn't talk much, you know, and a lot of times I would just read, you know, and read different things. And I remember reading one of the Imam Khomeini's jurisprudence book. I remember reading Man and Universe, you know, all these books. I started picking them up and reading them. And then for Eid one day, and I was really looking for this book. He got a Najah Balaga for me. And when he got that for me, you know, it was really a big deal because I got to read that from cover to cover. So all of these things were coming together, and spending time with my friends. I was still going to the halakas, mind you, because basketball was still one of my favorite things to do, even though I was going through a so-called depression. And I guess I was going through withdrawal of Sunni Islam, maybe. So my friends saw that, and they wouldn't let me speak during the halakas. And I remember a friend of mine telling me to this day that he says, don't spend time with your brother-in-law. Shias are kafir, you know. And I said, how do you know? And he says, ulama say that they are. And I said, well, that's not enough for me. You know, I said, you got to tell me a little bit more than that. You know, because these are my friends. I still spend time with them, and you know, their opinion counted, you know, because, you know, this is my social aspect of life, and I was living on my own at this time. So it was just me and whatever time I spent with my brother-in-law with these guys playing basketball, and then schoolwork or work, you know. So a lot, you know, he was the only one that told me that, you know, right blatant me in my face, you know. The other guys, they would say, well, I don't know, it's, you know, I would try to stay away because, you know, it's not really safe. I said, well, why isn't it safe? You know, we would get in these discussions, you know, and they would tell me because, you know, a lot of the things they do is questionable. And I said, well, how so? Prove it, you know. And I was the only one asking, prove it. And they would get frustrated, you know, because, I mean, we were just learning from each other, you know, and we didn't have any scholar there telling us and giving us halakas. We would just get a little bit from Quran and a little bit hadith and then talk about it, you know. So I was like, well, I mean, unless you can prove it to me otherwise, then you can't tell me it's wrong. It's not fair to say. So I began praying with my hands down and praying, you know, learning about Shia jurisprudence and, how we pray. And, one of my friends, I remember him saying to me, we prayed together at the masjid, and as we were leaving, he said that, I noticed that every time we did a different position in the prayer, you did the takbir. And I said, yeah. And he says, that, I've read about that before, but you shouldn't do that. I said, why not? If you read about it, it means that it's a practice that's done, no matter what madhab is it, And I said, and I've been reading about it. And I remember that friend, he started spending time with my brother-in-law, asking him for books and different things. So he would give him like fiqh books so he can try, I guess his job, what he felt his job was to try to prove it wrong. So he got all these fiqh books and things like that. And he's like, well, there's no references. He's like, well, fiqh books don't give references. That's what the ulama are for. We rely on them to give us the fiqh, and because they've studied the references, they know where to look for it. But anyways, that was going on, and a lot of these things were happening. So slowly but surely, they stopped spending time with me. And we kind of kept it more of just the basketball thing. Some of them don't talk to me anymore. And some of them now have, openly say, he's kafir, stay away from him. I mean, some of these guys, like, known them since they were in their Pampers, And, now they're calling me somebody that's kind of brought them along as younger guys, They don't speak to me, and, it's okay. I've always been that type that's never been affected by others. That's why as I mentioned, when I went to high school, it wasn't really a big shock, because I wasn't trying to be popular or be amongst, it wasn't something that was, I guess, something I had to do. So being unpopular was okay with me, as long as I felt that this was the truth and it hadn't been proved otherwise. And I would tell them, please prove it to me, and it was never something that they could do. They could just say and call names and bash, and but I was like, well, that's not enough for me. You can call me all the names you'd like, but please prove it, So right now it's just been more of a basketball, sports thing. So Assalamu alaikum, we see each other. If anything else happens, then we just talk about it. Some of them have I guess eased it down a little bit. We still send emails and see how each other's doing, make sure everybody's okay. And if they have a question, I try to answer it. I try not to be too much in their face about it. But they know who I am, and I guess to let them know that taqiyya is not something that we need to do, especially here in America. And I don't need to do it. You know my beliefs. I know yours. And if you have a question about it, feel free. So that's been kind of that. Because it took me some time. I went through the transition. First it was, Sunni, and then I was like, well, we're all Muslim, and everybody goes through that transition. We're all Muslim. No one's different from the other. And I would say maybe about a year. I was still reading both books, and I would prove from both references and try to learn everything. I was at that point, I was sucking in any type of knowledge that I can get from anywhere. So maybe about a year, and I had a real, it was like Allah said it for me perfectly, that I can get this chance to do as much research as I can to learn about it. So it was almost as if it was like slow motion. Maybe that was the depression he meant. It was almost like slow motion for me. And that year I got a lot of chance to learn a lot of things and transition. It was because you're losing friends, you're losing some people that you're really close with. I mean, even family members, were in conflict with it. I remember stories of people throwing Najib Alaga and ripping it and saying, well, this is not, different things like that. I remember one situation. I was with friends at their house, and I was reading the Sahifa Sajadiyya. I was reading the tafsir on it, and I was just reading the book, and one brother told me, he says, don't read this book, because they do mota. I was like, okay, that's the only reason you don't want me to read that book. I said, okay. I said, anything else? And he says, no, just don't read it. So, and I was almost afraid to spend the night there that night. I was worried because he was a foreign brother and he had just moved here. So I don't know what I was gonna get that night. So I kind of stayed up all night and watched him watch me. So it was an interesting night, that one. So that transition was tough. It was tough. How did I deal with it? Prayer, trying to get that nearness to Allah. I mean, no one, I think that no one went through as much hardship as Imam Hussein and his family. But Imam Ali also, I would refer to him a lot, he got to the point where people wouldn't say salam to him, and he would, and not to where they wouldn't say salam, but when he said salam to them, they wouldn't reply back. So I got a lot of that, when I would go to the masjids and things like that, the different masjids, because the masjids in Orlando, they were far from me. So when I would come back from school or whatever, I would go to any of the masjids, and then people wouldn't say salam, just because you were praying with your hands down, not knowing if I could have been Maliki or whatever. They just didn't, So Imam Ali was definitely an example for me, reading through Najm al-Balagha and things like that, and his hardships that he went through, after the demise of the Prophet. I think that Imam Ali, he should be an inspiration for everyone, but his life hits every aspect of life that any Muslim can relate to. The hardships, the ups, the downs, the battles, the sacrifices. So all of those things. Within the hardships, I definitely can say that I got a lot of inspiration from that. Yeah, coming from, I guess, a Sunni background or a Sunni family. My mom, like I said, she came from Catholicism, then to Nation of Islam, and then to Sunni Islam. And it was slightly different because it had more of a Warisdi Muhammad Sunni background, where a lot of it's very pro-black, and my mom wanted us to have that, and it's. I don't necessarily, I'm not necessarily would say I'm pro-black, or I wouldn't say I'm not pro-black, or either way, either or. But I guess she felt that we were maybe losing that aspect of it, so it was really hard for her to see us, especially me and my younger brother now, who's learning about it, to come over and transition into that. It was hard for her because she wanted us to be a family, and that was big on her family. Make sure we're together. We all go to the masjid together. And now I came along, and not everybody's going to the masjid together because I'm going to Jafari or Hosseini or wherever masjid I'm going to, and it's not necessarily how she wants it to be. So it was a conflict at first, and it was a lot of issues that she had. Well, we're not Sunni, we're not Shia. That was a big argument. It's like, well, Mom, there is slight differences, and there is some masjids we can't necessarily go to without having some sort of issue or disagreement. Not necessarily the masjid she was going to per se, because I guess it was more of a Warisdi Muhammad masjid, but the person there did challenge us a couple of times. So it was hard because she saw that, and she saw that it was a change for me, and we would kind of bump heads at times with some of the things, and like some of the ways that we teach the kids on how to pray, and some of the ways that we were praying, and some of the things like combining the prayers and praying on the turba. She didn't see the importance of necessarily praying on that, and it's like, well, then we have the prayer mats and the prayer rugs, and why do you need the dirt and the clay? So she had all these new things, and a lot of times people don't do well with change, even though she did transition almost 3 times. So but now it's coming along. My mom lives with me now, and obviously when you live with people, it has more of an impact on them. She sees how it's changed me, and that that I guess the full transition has affected me, and that, you know, hopefully it has some sort of effect on her. Well, yeah, I guess when my mom decided, you know, because she goes with us to the programs now every Saturday when we have the programs at the center. So she comes with us, you know. She won't necessarily tell you that this is what she believes, because she doesn't, you know, we have a fun relationship where, you know, she doesn't want to necessarily tell me, well, this is what, it is truthful, but, you know, now that she sees my brothers and sisters are going there now. So it's we've kind of pulled her in by the family aspect. And as she's there, we tell her about different things, you know, well, why you have Imam Ali and the Adhan, and why do you have, why is the Imam's important? Why do you have to remember Imam Hussein every year and commemorate his martyrdom, things like that. So a lot of times those things come up, and you know, even now, you know, she talks about how the story of Zainab always affects her, you know, so and how she was, you know, martyred, and how she was dragged from Karbala to Kufa to Sham. You know, she tells us about those. So that alone tells me that, you know, has had some impact on her, and, you know, and through her actions, even going to the center. Because my mom would blatantly tell you, if she doesn't want to do it, she won't do it, meaning that she dislikes it altogether. But her actions by going and coming with us, you know, has shown that, you know, that transition and has some sort of impact on her. Well, I would say all of them now are pretty much Shia. I was one of the first ones who came in and decided that, you know, this is what I want to do, and this is the path that I want to follow. And I remember as one time as me and my brother were working together in Orlando, and it gave us a chance to actually do a lot of talking. And, you know, he was still going to the masjid, and his name's Omar, you know, so we like, bro, you have to change your name. We're going to use your middle name, Sharif. So if he hears that, you know, he's going to be like, he'll probably laugh it off. But even now today, most of the brothers like, well, we're not going to, we'll call you Sharif from now on. So, you know, he's learned about it, and, you know, we gave him books, Najib Balagha, different tafsir, Ayatul Puya tafsir, different like that. So he's come along and come along pretty well. And my sisters, you know, my brother-in-law, obviously he's married to one of my sisters, so she's the one, she's Shia as well. And my three other sisters, one lives in Tampa here, she's also, so it's had a great impact on them. You know, they see that, you know, how it's changed my brother and myself. So they just came along. And of course they want their kids to follow. You know, my nephews, they're now starting college. So my oldest sister that lives in North Carolina, she wants them to make sure that they're, you know, if anybody she wants them to be like myself, my brother-in-law, and my brother. So it's been something that, you know, she's been really pulling. She's like, this is what she wants, you know, and she not necessarily would say, oh, I'm Shia per se, but she would want her kids to make sure that they come to the masjid with us and follow that. With my nephews and them going to college and everything, and being amongst non-Muslims and everything, she would want that example from myself, my brother-in-law, and my younger brother. So she's always made sure that they follow that and make sure they try to use us as an example for them. And they're good kids, and they've grown up to be very smart and hardworking. So it's you know, it seems, you know, she feels that it's had some sort of impact on them as well. So, and anytime they come around, they come down here to visit us, this is always something that we try to, you know, at least give a little lesson, you know, either through our actions or just, you know, maybe sit down together and just talk about what's going on with them in their lives and things like that. I don't want to say that it was me. I would say me and my brother-in-law has put a lot of work into the effort of making sure the people that he loves and the people that are around him have become, you know, on the true path. And much credit to him, you know, he's done a lot of work, you know. He's known as the person to go in the Sunni masjid as soon as somebody gives their shahada and grab them up, you know, and teach them about Ahlul Bayt. And they hate him for that, but you know, and he's known all over Orlando for that. I would say there has been quite a bit of challenges. It's a culture clash. I mean, coming from, you know, I guess a lot of people weren't, because the way I see it is a lot of the brothers that are foreigner brothers, they come here and, you know, they establish their communities, and mostly the people who look like them do it, you know, come in and practice it, especially Shia Islam, because it's been such a hidden religion. And back home, I know that because of scrutiny and people, you know, being killed and things like that, it's been something that's been behind doors, you know. So I guess coming here it's just something that's natural. So somebody who comes in different, you get a lot of stares, and, you know, and even that first night when I went with my brother-in-law, I was like, okay, well, everyone's staring at me, and we were the only two black Muslims there, so it was, you know, you get a lot of eyes. So again, so it's hard for both people, myself and for the brothers that are there, because it's not something they see every day, you know. How do they, I mean, they don't know who I am, I don't know who they are. So it's been a hard transition first. Now it's no problem. A lot of the brothers know me, and I get along. I grew up with a lot of their kids and went to college with some of their kids. So a lot of the brothers know me, so we don't have as much issue now. But when we came in, it was quite an issue. I know what truth is, and again, I didn't try to allow people to affect. You know, I honestly believe that people don't hinder you from your religion, because it should be between you and Allah, not necessarily between you and those people, because they have maybe some sort of hang-ups or some sort of, not necessarily, you know, I mean, they have some sort of, not racism, but some sort of, it's a cultural clash for them. That's something that they're not used to. And because they're not used to it, and you're not used to them, you know, sometimes you react differently. So it didn't affect me. You know, the masjid or the center is not what makes me, or the people in the masjid is not what makes me. So I figured that's, you know, not going to be something that affected my going to the masjid or going to the center. And I just kept doing, you know, what I do best, you know, and trying to become a better Muslim, you know.
I'm assuming after Orlando you moved to Tampa,
Mm-hmm.
and you went to a new community,
Yes.
new center. How was that transition? How did that transition go?
Well, my original reason for it was because of moving from Orlando to Tampa. My original reason was because of the diversity in the Tampa community. I felt that everyone comes together here, and it seemed like there was a lot more converts, or a lot more brothers that came from Sunni Islam, and a couple of brothers I know that, you know, definitely used to be Sunni at the masjid. So, and I had known maybe about 3 or 4 other brothers that moved here already. So it was just something that I wanted to do because of that. I mean, my original goal after I graduated from college was to come here and be a part of the community, you know, help out any way I can, and be a full-fledged, you know, not necessarily, I guess, a member, if you want to call it that, to make sure I'm in it and making sure that I'm a part of it. So that was the goal when I moved here. I would tell them that, you know, seek the truth, you know, and make that intention. And when you make the intention, Allah is going to tell you and bring you to the truth, no matter what it is. I mean, Ahlul Bayt will always show themselves by themselves. You know, me saying and giving you a long, elaborated explanation is not going to it's not going to change your mind one way or the other. But Ahlul Bayt have shown themselves time and time again throughout history, today, and even by those ulama today that are representing them have shown, you know, what is. I guess I have a lot of stories.
If you could just share one.
Well, I would say maybe the story of Qasim, you know, that I named my first son after him. And his stance, even though he was young, that he defended his uncle no matter what, and that you know, he was the son of Imam Hassan, and you know, I guess the impact that he had, you know, on Imam Hussein, even though, I mean, today we have nephews and we have people that we're related to, and we wouldn't necessarily have that that reverence for them, you know, as Imam Hussein had for his nephew. And he knew that, I guess that was his last amana, his trust for his brother. So to give that up, you know, and to sacrifice that, you know, for truth, you know, hence the reason why I named my first son, Qasim, you know.
5 kids.
5 kids. I have 1 on the way.
You can hear the ages and the names of the kids.
The oldest is Qasim, he's 8. Second is Mohsen, he's 6. They're all 2 years apart. The third one is Ruqayya, she's 4. And then we have Zainab and Asya, they are 2. And then we have another one on the way. I guess, you know, I guess one thing that I've learned from Shia Islam is leadership and sacrifice. And I've always tried to, I guess, implement those 2 things. So it's really important for me to respect leadership and understand leadership and follow leadership, you know. And I think once you have that, you know, the sacrifices that you make because of leadership, it just kind of, they go perfect hand in hand. That's it. So that's one thing that actually affected me a lot from, I guess, Sunni Islam, because that leadership, the leaders that we have always been great, and their sacrifice that they made for it it's shown. So that's always hit me really hard. I would think so, because there is a Sunni hadith from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said that you know, the father to his children is like the prophet to his nation. So I've always tried to make sure, of course, that leadership and I guess lead my ship, as I was told by one leader, to make sure we lead our ship in the best way so that they become good leaders and lead, you know. So, yeah.